Salutations, pups, and welcome to Chapter 10 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, a link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get on into it. Chapter 10, Greeting Old Friends. Summary. Izuku starts training One for All with his mentors, only to remember he still needed to tell All Might about the vestiges. Author's notes. Hello everyone! I am finally done with my portfolio. Yay! College is still super stressful, but at least now I can go back to having my evenings free to write again. Thank you all so much for all your lovely comments, encouragements, and support. You're seriously the best. I know I said we would have some Bakugo point of view this chapter, but this, as always, got much longer than intended, and after I reached 8.5k words, I went, okay, I might need to cut this in half. So next chapter we'll get some Bakugo point of view. Promise. Anyway, hope you enjoy this chapter. Trigger warnings. Swearing. Hashtag let Izuku swear. Izuku's point of view. The next morning, Broccoli was eating breakfast together with his dad and sister. Thankfully, his dad seemed to be on speaking terms again, so the breakfast wasn't nearly as awkward as it had been yesterday. Shota and Toshi both had the morning off, and Izuku had the rest of the week free from school, since high schools around the city still had entrance exams left. Shota let out a frustrated groan, which made Broccoli look up from where he was drinking some water on the floor. He noticed his dad was frowning rather intently at his phone. "Still no answer?" Toshi asked, worry laced in his voice. "His phone had no battery last night, but he promised to charge it. I just hope nothing happened to him after we said goodbye," the man grumbled. "Shit, I knew I should have made sure he got home safe," Shota said through gritted teeth as he tried calling again. Broccoli's eyes widened with realization and his ears twitched as he finally picked up the low, barely noticeable sound of vibrations coming from the other side of the apartment. He had heard the sound all morning, but had just assumed it came from one of the neighbors. But it was coming from his phone. His phone, which was currently hidden under one of the cabinets inside his dad's office while charging. Immediately, Broccoli took off and darted into the office. He heard his dad mutter something when the call didn't go through again, and Broccoli wasted no time gently pushing the door closed behind him. Shortly after moving in with his dad's, Izuku had noticed a power outlet that was basically unusable. Or, well, it was unusable for humans. The outlet was well hidden behind and under one of the large file cabinets in his dad's office. The space beneath it was just big enough for Broccoli to squeeze through and to put his phone on to charge. It wasn't easy, per se, but after a lot of trial and error, he had managed to learn how to plug and unplug the device while still being in cat form. He gently put his teeth around the thickest part of the cord and held his paw on the top of the phone, putting his whole weight on the device. Then he pulled, and with a pop, the cord unplugged from the device. Letting out a small sigh of relief, Broccoli started crawling out from under the cabinet, pushing his phone in front of him over the carpeted floor. When he finally got out, he rustled his fur and sneezed. "Damn, it is dusty under there," he thought, shaking himself again and making the rest of the dust fly off of him. And now to the tricky part, Broccoli thought, looking around the room. Usually, he did this during the night, where he would be covered in darkness and his dads were asleep. But now, he had to risk it. After making sure that the door was pushed close enough that no one could see him, Broccoli sat down and took a deep breath. And then, with a puff of smoke, he transformed into a human. Izuku could feel the vestiges' confusion and panic when he transformed. "Kid, what are you doing? I thought you didn't want them to find out." Instead of answering their frantic questions, Izuku just quickly grabbed his phone close to his chest and transformed back into his cat form. The device, as always, disappeared along with his clothes. "There we go," Broccoli thought in relief, letting out a sigh of relief when he saw the door was still pushed closed. "I'm still hella confused how that works," Diagora muttered. "Yeah, does it go, inside of you? Like in your stomach or something?" Broccoli cringed at that. Don't ask me, I'm just as confused as you are, he answered. Honestly, as fascinated as Izuku was with quirks, this was one of the things he'd rather not dwell on too much. The thought of carrying items around inside his body and organs made him feel nauseous. So instead, he had decided years ago to just be grateful that it works. Even if it didn't work on heavier items, like his shoes or bag, he was still glad that he could carry around small items and clothes. The idea of having to run around naked every time he changed into a human was not fun, and something he was very happy he didn't have to deal with. When Broccoli returned from the office, his dads were both dressed in civilian clothes and were getting ready to head outside. Broccoli's eyes widened and he ran towards them, meowing to get their attention. Oh, there you are. We're just going out to check on the problem child. Need to see he is actually alive. We'll be back later, Chota explained, pulling on his jacket. Broccoli panicked, but he knew that he could do nothing to stop them. And without another word, his dads went outside, leaving him and Slushy alone in the apartment. He jumped up on the windowsill in the office and waited until he could see them round a corner. And as soon as they were out of sight, Broccoli rushed outside, going in the opposite direction that his dads had went. When he was far enough away from the apartment, and slightly out of breath, Izuku transformed back into a human and leaned against the wall of a random alley. He quickly pulled his phone up and winced at all the missed calls and messages. No wonder they were worried. Swallowing nervously, Izuku called Toshi, thinking he was probably the easiest to trick out of the two. The vestiges nodded in agreement inside his head. It barely rang once before the man answered. Young Midoriya, are you all right? The man asked frantically. Izuku flinched at the worried tone in his mentor's voice, and he took a deep breath. I'm fine, All Might. I was out running, and I forgot my phone at home, he lied, pushing down the guilt of once again having to lie to his hero. Oh, I see. Well, I am glad to hear that you are all right. Me and Aizawa are actually on our way to go check on you. Do you want us to pick you up? Pick me up? Why? Izuku asked, feeling confused. Have I missed something? There was some mumbling on the other side before Izuku heard a click, and it seemed Toshi put him on speaker because Shota was the next to speak. We tried to call you to ask if you wanted to train at UA this morning. If you want, we can pick you up on the way, Shota explained, voice as bored and monotone as ever. Though there was also a slight edge to it, one Izuku probably hadn't noticed if he didn't already know how worried the man had been. Izuku's eyes widened when he realized that the man had asked, and he shook his head before he realized that they couldn't see him. No, that's okay. I'm not at home anymore, and I only went back to get my phone after I realized I forgot it. But I can meet you outside of UA? He suggested, heart racing in his chest. Izuku was silently begging the men to take the bait and not go to his mom's apartment and look for him. That would be a disaster. There was a moment of silence before the two agreed, and they soon ended the call. As soon as they hung up, Izuku slid down the wall and let out a sigh of relief. That was way too close, he groaned, dragging a hand through his hair. You know, it would be much easier if you just, I don't know, told them about all of this? Nana suggested, appearing next to him. Izuku glared at her transparent form, and she leaned back, raising her hands in peace. I'm just saying, she said with a small smile. Izuku sighed and stood up. We need to go so we won't be late. Kiddo, shouldn't you get your shoes? Nana asked, causing him to pause and look down. Shit, he swore. The vestiges gasped inside his head, and he glared straight ahead. I'm 15. I'm allowed to swear, he muttered, quickly raising the pace towards his hideout, where he kept his shoes and backpack. The whole way there, the vestiges kept complaining about their little green bean growing up too fast. And the whole time, Izuku felt his face grow more and more red. Why didn't this quirk come with a mute button? Izuku grumbled, his bare feet hitting the pavement as he started running. By the time he reached UA, his dads/mentors were already standing by the gate. "Sorry I'm late," Izuku called out, running towards them. His lungs were literally on fire from having ran the whole way, and he was breathing heavily. "It's all right, my boy," All Might reassured him with a smile. Aizawa, on the other hand, did not look so forgiving. "I am pretty sure I told you to keep better track of your phone. We thought something might have happened to you," he told him sternly. Izuku flinched. "Sorry, sensei," he mumbled, looking down at the pavement in shame. He really didn't have an excuse for having missed all those calls. It wasn't like he could say, "I was spending time with you two and forgot that time." Aizawa looked at him for a moment, before he sighed. "Anyway, let's go. No use standing here and wasting any more time," the man muttered, turning around and leading the way through the gate. And with that, they headed to one of the training facilities of UA, namely, Gym Gamma. Izuku had been to UA quite a few times by now, but he had never been to this specific gym, so he was understandably excited. But on the way there, Aizawa suddenly stopped, and All Might and Izuku, who had been walking behind him, came to a stop as well, and looked at him curiously. Aizawa turned around, a conflicted expression on his face while he looked between them. "Before we begin, you should probably tell All Might what you told me yesterday," the man said carefully. Izuku went rigid, having ashamedly kind of forgotten about that. Next to him, All Might looked confused. "Tell me what?" he asked, glancing between them. Aizawa sighed and gestured for them to follow him. At the side of the gym, there was a secluded part of the building with a bench against the wall. The man gestured for them to sit down. "It might be best if you sit down for this," he said, almost gently. All Might swallowed and glanced between them nervously, one more time before he did what Shota told and sat down. Izuku sat down next to him, and Shota moved to stand by the side of the bench and lean against the wall. "So, tell me what?" All Might repeated, looking at Izuku. Well, you know when I called you yesterday and asked you about the quirk?" All Might nodded. Well, turns out that they, they are, he trailed off, not being able to find the right words. How had he been able to explain this to Shota? Something about telling All Might, telling Toshi, felt so much more scary. I don't want to hurt him, he thought. "Come on, kiddo. He deserves to know," Aizawa said, almost exactly at the same time as Nana did, making Izuku jump. Izuku took a deep breath and braced himself. "They are still here. All of the past users, I mean. They are here, in the quirk, and they can see and hear us, even now, and, Nana says hi?" he rambled, smiling sheepishly. His mentor just stared at him. "Are you sure?" he asked, much like Aizawa had done the night before. "Positive," he confirmed. Then, one of the vestiges whispered something, and he smiled. "Shota was the one who proposed to you, but when he asked you to marry him, you started crying because you had wanted to be the one to propose, and had brought a ring, too. It's the same rings that you are wearing to this day," Izuku told them, recounting the events. It wasn't until after he said that, and saw the slight, uncomfortable look on Aizawa's face, that Izuku realized how creepy he probably sounded, and he was quick to backtrack. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to sound creepy or rude. I promise I won't pry into your lives. Nana just told me that so you would believe." Before Izuku could let out another word, All Might was suddenly hugging him. Izuku let out a loud oof at the impact and blinked in confusion. I'm sorry?" Izuku tried again, feeling scared that he had upset the man. All Might just hugged him tighter and shook his head. "It's all right, my boy. I'm not mad. I'm just happy. Thank you for telling me this," All Might said, his voice rough and sounding like he was fighting back tears. Izuku hesitantly hugged the man back. It was the first time anyone had ever initiated a hug in years, and he wasn't sure what to do. But soon enough, he felt himself starting to shake too, and he clutched onto All Might, letting out a sob as he buried his face against his shoulder. She wants you to know that she is sorry, Izuku shakenly said, trying his best to repeat Nana's words while she said them. He could feel barely their touch from Nana's hand, stroking his hair encouragingly, and he took a deep breath. And she's really proud of you. They all are, and you couldn't have chosen a better success. Hey, I'm not saying that! He laughed tearfully, shaking his head. All Might chuckled too, and way too soon the man leaned back, ending the hug. I think I agree with them on that last point. I'm proud of you, my boy. Izuku's eyes widened, and he looked away with a small frown. You can't possibly mean that. I couldn't even use a quirk without my limbs breaking the other day, he said, curling into himself and gripping the bench next to him tightly. Immediately, All Might and the Vestiges told him not to worry about it, and that no one expected it to go smoothly on the first try. Izuku kept curling into himself even more, his shoulders hunched up almost to his ears. Well, I don't agree with how everything was handled, Aizawa drawled, making Izuku look up at him. I do agree that you shouldn't beat yourself up over not being able to control the quirk. It would be completely irrational to expect someone to master a quirk so soon after they got it. Next to him, All Might smiled brightly and turned to Izuku. Exactly. That's why we are going to train, my boy. You will see that you will have mastered the quirk in no time, he told him encouragingly and ruffled his hair, gaining a small laugh from Izuku. But don't get impatient, Aizawa added. We will train here at UA, and only here, where we are close to Recovery Girl and can supervise you and make sure nothing breaks, neither in your body or in the facility. Sound good? Yes, Sensei, Izuku answered, feeling a bit better and determined to start training. Good, then let's... Before Izuku could hear the rest of that sentence, one of the Vestiges suddenly called out, gaining Izuku's attention. Izuku, wait! We need to tell you something. The boy blinked in confusion, and when All Might got up, Izuku stayed seated on the bench. Hikage, right? What's wrong? He asked, frowning at the whirlpool of words and emotions coming from the Vestiges. They seemed to be arguing about something. Some of them were telling Hikage to be quiet, while others argued that they need to know. Izuku frowned, feeling confused and overwhelmed. What are they talking about? Kid? Aizawa asked, laying a hand on Izuku's shoulder and snapping him out of it. What's going on? All Might asked, sitting back down next to Izuku. I'm not sure, Izuku answered, shaking his head. Guys, what's going on? He asked, looking down at the ground and trying to concentrate on the back of his mind. Finally, they seemed to have come to some sort of agreement, and Hikage's voice cut through the rest. It's about my quirk. Your quirk? Izuku repeated, noticing Aizawa and All Might watching him. He must look insane right now. Yes, other than One for All, I also had a quirk called Danger Sense. Danger Sense? Izuku once again repeated, nodding his head. He remembered that from his notes he took yesterday. Exactly. And just like the name suggests, it lets me sense where there was immediate danger. But now it seems like you might have it too. Izuku froze at that. What? Why would you say that? Because yesterday, at the store, it activated. You know those headaches? Those were no regular headaches. It was my quirk warning me of danger. Danger? You mean that teen? But wait, even if that's true, why would I suddenly be able to use your quirk? He asked, his mind spinning with all this new information. Kiddo, what are they saying? We have no idea why any of this is happening. All we know is that it seems like you can access and use my quirk, maybe even the others too, so you should brace yourself because they might activate in the future. Midoriya? Izuku jumped up and looked around, meeting the worried eyes of Aizawa and All Might. Aizawa had moved to kneel in front of him and was gripping his shoulders. Izuku hadn't even noticed him move. Talk to us, kid. What's going on? Aizawa said, his worry clear in his voice and his mask slipping just a little, reminding Izuku of Shota. I'm not sure, but... Izuku trailed off and swallowed nervously. It seems like I will develop more quirks, he said, feeling confused. His dad's eyes widened, and next to him, Izuku heard All Might start coughing before letting out a loud, "What?" I'm not sure how, Izuku continued, but, apparently one of the past few years' quirks, Danger Sense, activated yesterday, and now they seem to think I will be able to use the rest of their quirks, too? Aizawa groaned and buried his face in his hands. Izuku felt really bad for him. In just a few days, the poor man's whole world had gotten flipped upside down. When his dad finally looked up, his eyes were tired. Are you sure? He asked. No, not really. All I know is that Hikage just told me, but, they seem pretty sure. His dad nodded, and before standing up and facing All Might. And did you know about this? Aizawa said, glaring at the other man. The blonde immediately threw his hands up and frantically shook his head, leaning back further into the bench. I had no idea. I didn't even know about the vestiges until today, and I never developed any more quirks, All Might explained, eyes and voice pleading Aizawa to believe him. The vestiges can confirm that All Might didn't know, Izuku quickly cut in, repeating what they were telling him. They didn't even know it was a possibility until yesterday. As soon as Aizawa's eyes traveled from All Might and over to Izuku, the blonde let out a deep sigh of relief. Izuku felt an ache in his heart at how strained their relationship seemed now. He hoped they would be able to mend things soon. For a moment, they were all quiet, until Aizawa let out a heavy sigh. So, these new quirks. Tell us about them, the man said, moving to sit down on Izuku's other side of the bench. Izuku smiled nervously and pulled out his travel-sized notebook. In it, he had some notes on the vestiges. Okay, I don't know the details, but I do have their names here, so... he said, clearing his throat and opening the first page of his notes that he took yesterday. In line from the 1st to the 8th, we have Yoichi, quirkless. The second user who won't tell me his name, quirk Gearshift. The third won't tell me his name either, but his quirk is called Fa-Jin. Then we have Hikage, which has the Danger Sense quirk, which so far only gives me massive headache when danger is near. After him came Diakoro, who had a quirk called Black Whip. Then we have N and his quirk Smoke Screen. Izuku trailed off after that and glanced up at All Might, who smiled at him sadly. Then we have Nana Shimura, who had the quirk Float. Then we have Nana Shimura, who had the quirk Float, his mentor continued. Right, Izuku nodded. Then, of course, we have All Might, and lastly me, who are, both quirkless. So, all in all, 5 new powers, Aizawa said. Aizawa asked, rubbing the front of his head and looking like he wanted to sleep for the next 10 years. Izuku smiled sheepishly. I guess? All Might rubbed the back of his neck. Well, that certainly is a lot to take in, but I'm sure it will be fine, my boy. We'll be here to help you all the way. Right, Aizawa? The man asked, glancing at Aizawa worriedly. The dark-haired hero just sighed again and lowered his hand before he looked up at All Might and Izuku. Right. We'll help you, kid. Don't worry about it, Aizawa reassured him, patting Izuku's shoulder. Izuku smiled tearfully at them, though inside he felt really guilty. How much more will they have to deal with because of me? But instead of voicing this guilt, Izuku forced the smile to stay on his face. Thank you, both of you, he said, ducking his head. What do you say we actually try and get some training done? Aizawa said, standing up and motioning for them to follow him. Izuku jumped to his feet. Yes, sensei! In the end, they managed to train for only barely an hour before Aizawa and All Might had to head over for a staff meeting. Miraculously, Izuku had managed to come out of the lesson without breaking any of his bones. But at the same time, he hadn't really managed to do anything. Despite trying to visualize the most mundane and silly things, he just couldn't get the quirk to work correctly. Am I doing this wrong? The next few days were spent with much the same lack of progress, and every day Izuku grew more and more frustrated. The vestiges were staying inside of his mind and encouraging him, but Izuku still felt so damn useless. Why couldn't he just do this? Every time he would flare up one for all, it would start to overflow and burn, making him want to cry out in pain, before eventually Aizawa moved to cut it off before the boy could hurt himself. So far, he had only broken one bone in his right arm. And that was mostly his own fault, because he had deliberately tried to use it when he knew Aizawa wasn't looking. Something that his teacher had been very, very upset about as soon as he had heard the crack and ran to his side. Needless to say, Izuku had gotten an hour-long lecture, both from Recovery Girl and his teachers, as well as the vestiges inside of his mind. Speaking of the vestiges, this wasn't anything Izuku would admit, but it was a bit scary every time his quirk got erased. Not because of the lack of power, but because everything would go quiet, as his connection to the vestiges would abruptly get cut off. The silence never lasted more than a second before Aizawa gave him back his quirk, though, so Izuku never felt the need to tell Aizawa about it. It was probably silly anyway, being scared to be alone in his own head. But when you've grown used to having 7 other people living in there, well, as loud and endearing as they can be, he also has quickly learned how to grow used to it. And having them gone, even for a second, felt downright awful and wrong. Izuku was having a hard time remembering a time before One for All. The vestiges' minds were always there at the edge of his own and keeping him company. It was around the last day before Izuku had to go back to his middle school when they finally made a breakthrough. Unsurprising to anyone, it was Aizawa who came up with the idea. What happens if you try spreading the quirk all over your body? Izuku looked up at him and furrowed his brows in confusion. You say that it feels overwhelming when you try to use it in one limb, so why not spread out the power? Who knows, maybe it will make it more bearable? The boy's eyes lit up and he eagerly nodded before taking a stance and trying to do just that. Imagine it flowing through your whole body, he repeated. After a while, Izuku felt the same electric pulsing surge through his legs, then further up and spreading all the way up to his head and to the top of his fingertips. It didn't hurt, not as much as it did when he concentrated it on a single area, but it certainly didn't not hurt either. He heard All Might gasp beside him. My boy, you're glowing? Izuku opened his eyes in confusion and looked down at his hands, and sure enough, green sparks were dancing around his limbs, something that never happened to All Might. Might be all the recess energy. Your body is still pretty small, Nana suggested. Izuku tried to move his head to nod, only to flinch and immediately get his quirk erased as he fell to the floor, panting and in pain. Are you okay? Aizawa and All Might asked, running towards him. Yeah, I think I'm fine, Izuku shakingly answered and stood up, wincing slightly. It just hurts, trying to move. I see. That's not good. Let's visit Recovery Girl, shall we? All Might said, gently, laying a careful hand on Izuku's back and leading him outside. Izuku just nodded and let himself be moved, feeling a bit upset that the plan hadn't worked. Hey now, no need to look so upset, my boy. I would say that was definitely an improvement. We'll keep working on it, All Might said encouragingly. That's right. That was a step in the right direction, Aizawa agreed, looking down at his phone and probably texting Recovery Girl to tell her that they were on the way. Recovery Girl was not thrilled to see him again for the second time in less than a week, but she was also relieved when she confirmed he at least hadn't broken anything this time, which made healing a relatively simple process. Aizawa looked at the clock and sighed. You should probably head home for the day. After all, your school starts again tomorrow, right? Make sure to get some rest before then. Izuku had to fight back wince at the thought of going back to school. He was not looking forward to seeing his classmates, or Kachan, again. But it was only a few more weeks before high school started, and then he wouldn't have to see any of them again. Or, well, he'd probably see Kachan, since he most definitely got into the hero course, but hopefully they won't be in the same class this year. The next morning, Broccoli headed out before his dad went to work. He stayed in a cat form all the way to the park, dragging his paws and dreading every step he took that led him closer to the school. Hey kiddo, are you okay? School can't be that bad, right? Yuichi said gently. Broccoli didn't answer, and instead crawled into the shed that he used as his hideout. There he pulled out his school uniform and got changed, his hands and body moving on autopilot as his mind was somewhere else entirely. When he went to grab his shoes, he paused. Izuku then shook his head and went for his old, worn-out shoes instead. He crawled back out before he pulled them on, only to wince at how they hurt, being way too small on his feet. Kiddo? Nana asked. Why are you not using your new shoes? Don't want them to get destroyed, Izuku answered quietly, before putting on his backpack and slowly making his way to school. Why would they get destroyed? Diagoro asked. Izuku sighed and gripped his backpack tighter. You'll see. Author's notes. Izuku. I promise I won't pry into your lies. Also, Izuku has been secretly living as their pet cat for the past 2 to 3 years. Thank you so much for reading and sticking around for this story. I get so happy every time I read your lovely comments, and it feels so good to be back. Next chapter is basically finished already and will be posted in a few days. Like I mentioned, the next chapter will get some Bakugo point of view, as well as Aldera bashing, and our favorite rat god being the best uncle. Hope you look forward to it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care. And that's a wrap on chapter 10. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think that I used a different voice for Hikage this time. And it was already too late for me to go back and change it. So, hope you like Hikage's new voice. And other than that, I hope that you enjoyed today's chapter. Please show Texiliaz some love. Please leave a comment for me if you like. I really enjoy reading your comments. It makes me super happy. And that's all. I'll see you tomorrow, pups. Bye-bye.